Welcome into my updated Ursa Titan build guide. This has been my main class and loadout in the Season of Defiance, and I made a few tweaks on the build since my previous video and since I've been able to run a bunch of GMs. This whole build centers around the Ursa Furiosa exotic gauntlets. Move faster while guarding. When Sentinel Shield is active, guarded damage converts to super energy when super ends. The important part here is that guarded damage converts to super energy when super ends. What is not written is that it also creates 10 to 15 orbs for your teammates depending on how much damage you guard them from. I'll give some tips and tricks on how to most effectively use this super after I go over the build, but you could just skip there now too. For the subclass, I'm using Sentinel Shield Super, which is required with this exotic. Then either Barricade is effective, but I typically use Rally Barricade for the added reload speed, stability, and range it gives you and your teammates, and it has a shorter cooldown. For melee, I use Shield Throw, and this is to have a ranged way of getting Overshield and proccing Focusing Strike mod to give back class energy. I don't use it much, and for that reason I don't build into strength. I know Shield Bash is a solid option, but I don't like having to be up so close in order to use my melee. The only reason I ever do run Shield Bash is for the added mobility of it, and to use it sort of like Icarus Dash on a Solar Warlock. For Grenade, I use Scatter Grenade because it does high burst damage and has pretty short cooldown of 1 minute 45 seconds. You could also use Vortex or Suppressor Grenades. Both of those are solid options. For aspects, I'm now using Controlled Demolition instead of Offensive Bulwark. Hitting a target with a Void ability or Volatile Explosion makes them volatile. Further damage to a volatile target causes them to explode, grants you and nearby allies health when volatile targets explode near you. Controlled Demo is better for GMs with higher ad density and void burns, but for certain GMs with lower ad counts and solar strand burns, I would still consider using Offensive Bulwark and solar weapons. The other aspect I'm using and can't live without on Void Titan is Bastion. Cast your super to grant Overshield to nearby allies. Casting your Barricade grants Overshield to yourself and nearby allies and empowers it, enabling it to slowly regenerate the Overshield of allies bunkering behind it and extend their Overshield duration. I like to use this inside of wells to create even more resistance and tankiness inside the wells for the team. Even with how powerful Well of Radiance is, you can still die in it in GMs. This adds some more protection and can save a team from wiping and returning to orbit. For fragments, I'm using Echo of Starvation to grant Devour on orb pickup. This is an incredible buff that makes Void feel so good in in-game content. It can be difficult to keep up in GMs on other builds, but with the amount of supers you're giving your teammates, I never seem to be without an orb or a kill, so I can keep this up most of the time. I'm also using Echo of Persistence to extend the duration of Overshield's invisibility and Devour. And finally, Echo of Obscurity to go invisible after doing a finisher. This is great for performing difficult mechanics or getting reses or just surviving a tough situation. I like to use this to have a way of escaping or saving the team if needed. There are other great fragments, but these tend to be the ones that I've had the most success with and have a real tough time taking them off. For stats on the build, I like to run 100 Resilience, 70 Discipline, plus Font of Focus to get it to feel like 100 Discipline. Then after that, I prioritize Recovery as high as possible, then Intellect, then Strength and Mobility. I always choose my armor pieces using d2armorpicker.com, which I highly recommend you also use. For the weapons, I'm running Wishender, which is absolutely crushing this season, doing a ton of damage and taking care of barrier champs. Also, the ability to see through walls can really help you figure out where enemies are and where to position yourself best. If I'm not running Wishender, I'm running Arbalest to take care of barriers, and this does especially well on GMs with enemies with high crit damage multipliers, like the tanks in Proving Grounds, or it can even shoot through the shield of the final boss of Glassway. In my energy slot, I'm running a Rapid Hit Explosive Payload Vouchsafe. If I could find a Shoot to Loot Explosive Payload Void Scout, I would use that, but I don't believe there is one. For my heavy, my number one choice is Retrofit Escapade. It's fantastic for ad clear and decent for boss damage. It has good ammo economy and pairs great with void burns and controlled demolition and volatile rounds. There are plenty of other good heavy weapons to use like linear fusions, high impact or adaptive frame rockets, grenade launchers, or other heavy machine guns. Now for mods, I'm running Heavy Ammo Finder, Kinetic Siphon if I'm using Wishender, and a Void Siphon because I get so many kills with Retrofit Escapade. Then Font of Focus to give an extra 30 Discipline when you have an armor charge, which is most of the time. Bolstering Detonation and Focusing Strike to get you back your Barricade fast. Void Reserves for the Retrofit Escapade and whatever resistance the GM calls for. For Mars Heist Battleground, I was running one Solar Resist mod and one Melee Damage Resist mod. Then Recuperation to get health on Orb Pickup, a Void Surge mod, and a Void Scavenger mod to top off our Retrofit Escapade. If I was running Solar Heavy Weapon, I would run a Solar Surge mod and a Solar Scavenger mod. Then Reaper to spawn an orb on the kill after you use Barricade, Bomber to reduce grenade cooldown on Barricade use, And finally, proximity ward to make getting finishers off a little bit easier. You get an overshield while performing a finisher, and then when you're done with the finisher, you go invisible from Echo of Obscurity. For the seasonal Ascendant Scepter, using Anti-Barrier Pulse, Unstoppable Scout, Overload Auto SMG, Authorized Mods Void, Authorized Mods Grenades, Scatter Orbs, Defiant Armory, and Origin Hone specifically for Retrofit Escapade, Volatile Flow, Bricks from Beyond, and Prismatic Transfer. Now for some tips and tricks for the build. First, team comp. I typically run this with at least one Warlock on Well of Radiance, but I like running it with 2 Wellocks most because there's 0 downtime between safety supers. Make sure to let the Warlocks use their wells first, and then if they don't have a well available, then cast your super. When you go into the shield, make sure to block to raise your banner shield. For positioning, you want to make sure the shield is protecting your teammates from incoming fire, and you don't move too fast or without telling your teammates because they are relying on your shield being there to protect them. You want to make sure not to stand in a Well of Radiance or a Healing Rift because that diminishes the amount of orbs created. You want to make sure to only use your super when you're expecting a lot of incoming fire because the amount of super generation and orbs created is based on how much damage hits your shield and how many teammates are being protected. To count as being protected, your teammates need to stand in the circle that spawns out from your banner shield. If they are behind you but not in the circle, it will not create orbs or give you super back. Also, the more damage your shield blocks, the longer it lasts. When the shield is coming to an end, I like to count it down for my teammates so they're not surprised and instantly die from being exposed to enemy fire. When it gets to the final bar of super, I count down 3, 2, 1, and then immediately pop a barricade to give everyone an overshield. When I'm running this build, I typically have to remind people not to save their supers because they aren't used to getting it back so fast. The only time you should save supers is if there are barely any enemies or possibly right before boss fights. There you have it, my Ursa Titan Grandmaster build. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope this build helps you clear more GMs. Peace.